Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today will be another Sharks weekly recap, this time of Week 18. So the Sharks this week were in Western Canada as they played 3 of their first 4 games of this Western Canada road trip, and their first matchup was against the Winnipeg Jets, the best team in the Central Division at the moment. And the Sharks had lost to the Jets earlier on this season. It was going to be a good rematch, and it was pretty good for the San Jose Sharks. It seemed like they were the better team for the 60 minutes leading up to an overtime period, but then the Jets got 2 power plays in the overtime, one brief, but then one full power play. But it was the Sharks who still managed to come out on top with a huge shorthanded goal from Joe Pavelski to get the 2 points there. Then the Sharks had to fly over to Calgary and face off against the best team in the Pacific Division, actually also the best team in the Western Conference, I believe, at the time. And the Sharks were looking to close that gap between them as they sit second place in the Pacific, or at least they did at the time. They do still. And also look to get revenge for their previous matchup against the Flames, in which they lost 8-5. And it was going to be interesting to see how the Sharks would respond if they do it physically or if they just stick to their game. And it seems as though they decided to just go all out for the 2 points. That's what they managed to do here tonight. Jones played a fantastic game, and the Sharks won by a score of 5-2. Sharks then flew not very far to Edmonton, Alberta, as they faced off against the Oilers. Certainly an easier matchup, not the same quality of opponent as they did have in those first 2 games, but still not to be underestimated. They do, of course, have Connor McDavid, so you never know what the Oilers are going to pull out in terms of performance, but the Sharks did a good job at shutting him down as well as the rest of the Oilers, and they took a score that was in a relatively easy game, 5-2. Offensive contributions for the week, Tomas Hertl here at the top, 3 goals, 2 assists for 5 points. That sets a new career high in goals with 25, a new career high in assists with 26, and a new career high in points with 51. So the contract extension given to Tomas Hertl during the offseason is certainly looking like a very good investment into number 48. Evander Kane, 3 goals and 2 assists for 5 points. For himself, he now has 24 goals as he continues to keep pace with Hertl as well as catch up to Joe Pavelski, and now has 47 points on the year. So solid season after a pretty rocky start for him. Kevin Labanc has a huge week, including a hat trick versus the Oilers. That gave him 3 goals on the week, 2 assists to add with that, and 5 points for 36 on the year. So a pretty decent offensive season for Kevin Labanc. Brent Burns continues his offensive ways, 1 goal and 3 assists, putting his assist total up to 50. So the first Sharks player, and maybe going to be the only Sharks player to hit 50 assists on the season, getting his point total up to 61, a 10-point gap over the next closest San Jose Shark, which is Tomas Hertl. Then Jonas Donskoy with 3 assists, 29 points on the year, as well as Thornton with 3 assists for also 29 points on the year. For news of the week, it is once again Erik Karlsson. He was in my news of the week the previous week, just because it was a question of, since he didn't fly with the team to Western Canada, it was then said that DeBoer maybe would suspect he'd join the team at some point. That didn't end up happening. I don't think it's a massive worry for Erik Karlsson that he doesn't end up joining the team. It was probably a bit of a long shot that he'd actually end up flying out to Western Canada just for like a game or 2, but I don't think there's anything to worry about. I'd say the only time you could maybe start worrying that this injury might be a bit more serious than it was made out to be is if he doesn't play the first home game back from this road trip at that point, or at least he doesn't like skate or something, like doesn't participate in like a practice or anything like that, because then you might want to worry a bit about that the injury is somewhat more serious than it was originally made out to be, although that was certainly the case anyway. He's already missed something like close to a month at this point, or 3 weeks or something like that. But hopefully he does end up returning. The Sharks aren't in any bad condition at this point. They are on a 5-game winning streak, looking to go 6 here tonight, again without Karlsson, but still you want him back in the lineup as soon as possible. Other injuries, not really anything major. Melker Karlsson went down with an injury against the Edmonton Oilers, but he does seem pretty good to go here tonight against the Vancouver Canucks. So the Sharks, I guess, dodged sort of, not really a bullet, but maybe like a small pebble, you could say, because it wouldn't be a huge loss, but still could hurt the penalty kill a bit and the fourth line, veteran presence, I guess, although Melker Karlsson's not much of a veteran. But he has a lot of experience, as well as Dylan Gambrell is not in the lineup tonight, and I don't believe that's healthy scratch terms, because Gambrell has actually been quite good for the Sharks in his couple of appearances here. So Lukáš Radil will draw back into the lineup. I think Gambrell's out with some sort of injury. I believe DeBoer said it was like a flu of some sort. So we'll see if he can at least play. He should be able to play in the home game after that, unless Radil actually puts up a good performance. At that point, he might be able to steal the spot back. That's sort of the risk sometimes when you end up out of the lineup with an injury. It's been unfortunate if the guy who replaces you plays well enough and you're not, let's say, someone who's like a lineup staple anyway, you could lose your spot with that. It's a bit unfortunate. On to Thornton, who I needed to talk about. I mean, I didn't need to talk about him, but I'd like to talk about him. I would probably be saying something about Thornton every single week if I wanted to talk about every single milestone that he hits, but this was a pretty good week for himself in terms of milestones. Not only does, I believe he tied for 15th or something in terms of games played, he also tied in the bigger milestone here, 9th all-time in assists with, of course, Mr. Hockey Gordie Howe, and he also only trails Teemu Selanne by a single point to tie for 15th in points all time. And so Joe Thornton, the 101st best player of all time in the NHL, having a huge milestone season just in general, all around, all across the board. Once he does pass Teemu Selanne, it'll be a pretty long way to go before you can get to the next guy, who I believe is Stan Mikita, who has something like 60 or 70 more points than what Thornton would have at that point. But still, it's technically possible if Thornton does play another year after this. Even if it doesn't happen, 15th place all-time in points is still a massive accomplishment. Class dismissed.